got a mic?
We're going to keep eating though, right?
Okay. I'm not getting a mic.
Except for me, that I have to do the thoughts. So I'm like trying to
Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and start our Planning Commission meeting tonight. Thank you all for being here. We'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please all join.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We've asked Commissioner Hurst to give us a legislative prayer or thought tonight.
Okay, so my thought is, it was given by Thomas Jefferson, and he said, every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. And that is one of the things that I really have enjoyed serving on the Planning Commission, is that I do think that even within this body, we have a lot of different ideas and things that are important and that we value, and I think that's collectively what helps us to make, good choices and decisions on some of our planning efforts. And so with that, I'll just give a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful for this opportunity to meet here this night, and that we have the opportunity to help and assist in making decisions for this beautiful community that we live in. Please bless us with thy Spirit, that we can have thy guidance to continue to make our community a great place to live. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. I might note for the record that prior to this meeting, we held a public meeting, invited members of the city to come in and express their opinions with regard to the Pages Lane commercial area. We're grateful for all who attended that, for all of the ideas that were expressed, and we look forward to reviewing those ideas and moving forward on that matter in the future. Because of that early meeting, we didn't have a chance to go home and have dinner, so I appreciate your indulgence in letting us have a bite to eat up here while you were waiting for us to start. First thing on the agenda tonight is a review of the minutes from a couple of previous meetings. The first we'll review are the meetings from April 12, 2017, which were amended and were tabled pending review of those amendments. And so we'll go ahead and start with that meeting. We'll just go through this page by page, and if anyone has any comments, if you could bring that to the chair's attention, we'll get those changes made. So looking at the minutes from the April 12th meeting, any changes on page 1? Page 2? Page 3?
Mr. Chair, on line 14, we were changing my Snyder to Mr. Snyder, and I think it got changed to me Snyder.
Me Snyder.
Yeah.
Third time's a charm. If we could change that to Mr. Snyder. Anything else on page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6?
I had 2 comments on page 6, and this is in the section where we had the addition. Starting with line 23, I'm just going to say how I would change this. The commissioners had a discussion about churches and places of worship in industrial high zones, and whether, instead of it, because it is ambiguous, I would say whether such uses should be a permitted, or whether such use, whether such use should be a permitted use or a conditional use. And then the last sentence of that new edition, starting on line 26, it said, the commissioners decided for purposes of consistency. I know that was discussed, but rather than attributing it to all of us definitively, I would just say several commissioners decided or offered for purposes of consistency. So maybe change it to several commissioners offered.
Is that right, though? Because that makes it sound like there was disagreement about that. Was there disagreement about that?
I don't think that there was, but I don't think that every single person said yes. I don't know. I just wanted it to be clear in the record. I'm cautious of when we
You think you
attribute
could say
it to
several
a simple
commissioners
agreed.
believed for the purposes of consistency?
I like that. I also would say, just as a style issue, I appreciate knowing sort of how the conversation went, maybe a little bit more detail. I know in the past, we've usually said, you know, Commissioner Helgeson says this, and Commissioner Wright agrees, or Commissioner, you know, instead of just the commissioners had a discussion. Sometimes I feel like some of the meaning gets lost, but that's just my personal view. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way.
I kind of agree. Like, when you say several, I'm going, well, who agreed and who didn't, or, you know, or like you said, just referencing, oh, so-and-so agreed with
Or we had a
Commissioner Hayman or
discussion.
whatever.
Sometimes I feel like that just is a little bit too much of a summary when we're talking about minutes, but
I had the same reaction actually reading these ones as well.
I agree, and I think, well, we'll make some changes to the next set that I think will
well, can we,
kind of reflect that.
can we direct staff to maybe perhaps in future consider just a
more
little bit more
specific.
specificity, I guess?
I think that would be a good idea. For purposes of these meetings, are we okay with several commissioners believe for purposes of consistency?
Yeah.
That'd be okay?
Yeah.
And any objection to changing it to such use? We okay on that? Any other changes on page 6? Page 7? Page 8? Page 9? I have a comment similar to what we've just discussed on page, or on line 44, beginning on the previous line, the commissioner, I guess it would be the commissioners or the commission. But again, the commission is not a person, so I think we need more specificity in the future on that, but I would guess that we'd want to say, here again, several commissioners also suggested, or the commissioners suggested sending flyers.
I like several commissioners, yeah.
Okay.
Since Logan's not here, we could say he's the commissioner.
Yeah, that's right. If Logan were here, he would volunteer for that position. And then also on line 47, also the commissioners debated the proposed open forum dates. Any objection to those changes? Anything else on page 9? Page 10? Thank you for your input. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
April 12th minutes.
Yes,
Just to be
sorry,
specific.
April 12th minutes.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let's move then to the Planning Commission minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, April 26, 2017. Again, we'll just go through this page by page. Any changes to page 1?
I have a couple. I think I arrived at 7:04. I'm just kidding. Totally teasing. I probably was even later than that. I think it's a little confusing to say Commissioner Wright on line 35 made a motion to reopen and table the minutes, unless that's at the very end of the minutes. So I did reopen them, but to put it at the front of the minutes sounds like, why would she reopen at the very beginning of the meeting? So either, I mean, I don't know what you commissioners feel about
I
that.
think you could leave it in there and just say later in the meeting. Commissioner.
I think that's
Yeah.
There you go.
It says that, doesn't it? Later, after all the commission members had
had
arrived.
arrived, but really it was reopened later after.
Later at the end of the meeting,
It was
maybe.
more at the end of the meeting. So I would prefer to keep it in this section, just
Okay.
because this is the minutes review and approval section.
So can we say, instead of later after all the commissioner members had arrived, just say, at the end of the meeting, Commissioner Wright made a motion to reopen and table the minutes.
Yeah, de-emphasizes the late arrival.
Yeah.
It's already been there twice, come on.
Well, I didn't get there till 7:44, so, you know, and then the vote was 7-0, so maybe it's better to say at the end of the meeting.
So,
I'm fine with that change.
thank you.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Anything else on page 1? Page 2. Let me make a comment on line 19, only because I think that we've said this before, but I'd like to change kind of the format. It says Chair Hershey opened the public hearing at 7:14 p.m. and seeing no comments, actually seeing no one wishing to comment, I think might be a better way to say that. It's kind of hard to see comments. So no one wishing to comment, close the public hearing. Any objections to that change? Anything else on page 2? Page 3? Page 4?
I have several on page 4. So bear with me here on some of these, but this kind of goes, this is a little bit more to that whole idea of adding a little bit more context and detail on some of the stuff that we're talking about. Starting on page, line 6. Okay, let's just back up to line 4. Commissioner Daley said, even with additional conditions, the parking and garbage truck turnaround issues remain a concern for him, and we're going to get rid of the period, and continue that with an explanation of, since he believes the garbage truck will continue to back out onto Pages Lane. So it just kind of explains why that's a concern, and instead of just, whatever. Then on line 26, let's see here, hang on. I'm trying to remember what my notes say. Commissioner Daley expressed a concern about the shortfall. No, hang on. No. Sorry. Can't read my own writing. At the end of that sentence, on line 27, we're going to add a new sentence. The shortfall represents over 1,100 square feet, which is more than all of the parking spaces combined. So that's kind of, I did express a concern about the development not meeting it, and then this is more of a why,
Yeah.
right?
And you stated that.
Yeah.
Can you please repeat that?
You bet. The shortfall represents over 1,100 square feet, which is more than all of the parking spaces combined. Then on line 37, first of all, waiver is spelled with an I, so W-A-I-V-E-R. And then guidelines, are those, I think those are actually requirements, aren't they? Requirements to fulfill the waiver? More than just guidelines, because guidelines feels loosey-goosey. So if we could change that to requirements.
On 35?
On 37, is that also on 35 too?
It's also 35.
Yeah, then change it there too, 35 and 37.
I missed that correction. Can you go over that again?
Yeah, so on lines 35 and 37, change the word guidelines to requirements,
Okay.
And then the
Correct
waivers
waiver.
down there.
and then fix the spelling of waiver on line 37.
Okay, good.
Then, as we continue that sentence, concluded the project on line 38, and then strike the rest of that sentence. Does not meet them, and we're going to explain it a little bit more with meets requirements 1 and 2, but does not meet 3A or 3B, which we had a discussion about that, kind of itemizing that and trying to explain more about why that was and wasn't. And then the last one I have, sorry for this, there's a lot on this page, sorry.
That's okay. I'm not quite up with you. So, the project meets requirements.
1 and 2, but doesn't meet 3A or 3B. And then strike does not meet them as it's currently written.
Okay.
And then the last one I had is the very last word on the page. He added if there are problems, the CUP can be redressed. I think, is it readdressed?
Readdressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, to readdressed. And that's all I got for that page.
I've got some.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, on line 42, we're talking about the children walking, it says the adjacent elementary school and nearby junior high school. I also included high school because there would be possibly some walking to the high school in that. Then further on, when it says, if the garbage truck is backing on either onto Pages Lane, I would strike the rest of that sentence from if and insert when the garbage truck backs away from the dumpster, over the sidewalk, and onto Pages Lane. That was my specific concern. Before pulling forward to make the turnaround within the development parking area.
So we're changing the word if to when.
We're striking from if to the end of the sentence and say when the garbage truck backs away from the dumpster, over the sidewalk, and onto Pages Lane before pulling forward to make the turnaround within the development parking area.
Okay.
And then on line 44, where it says, does not coincide with walking school children, I would put with, does not coincide with the hours the children are walking to and from school.
Okay.
That's what I've got.
So
Thank you.
back up to, for me, back up to the first paragraph. I think there were more, I know that I said that I was still concerned about the garbage truck backing onto Pages Lane. I don't know if you want to put it in that paragraph or later when Commissioner Helgeson said it, because that was still a concern that I had. But then we had a lengthy discussion with the applicant about the different things that we talked about to put the sign up and to do it during a certain hours and all these different things. And so I feel like that's sort of missing there. So does the commission have a place they think is a good place to put that? Otherwise, I would just put it up with Commissioner Daly, his comments on line 5.
I think that's probably when it was raised, because after that, the
Then we
applicant
start
came up
talking
and
about
then
it. So
discussed
that's where I
it.
would put it. I also think on,
You want to tell us what you'd put?
oh,
What you'd like added.
you can just add Commissioners Daly and Wright, or you can say Commissioner Wright agreed with Commissioner Daly. I mean, I don't really care exactly how it's
You could
phrased.
put Commissioner Wright expressed the same concern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Commissioner Wright expressed the same concern. That sounds
There you go.
fabulous. Later on 35, line 35, Commissioner Wright said, this is a perfect example by the Planning Commission has given some flexibility. I think Commissioner Daly's, how he inserted the 1 and 2, the waiver requirements, that's helpful to make that more clear, but I don't love how that's sort of stated that suddenly assistant planner Younger reviewed the waiver guidelines / requirements, and that's the perfect example of why, because it's referencing those guidelines or requirements, I guess is the words we're using. And I just feel like that's, I might have said exactly that, but it was, maybe we can say something that says, Commissioner Wright said that these waiver requirements help the Planning Commission, help give the Planning Commission flexibility to give that 10%, something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? I should probably come with these all written out, right?
So assist the commission in arriving at a decision whether to grant the waiver within the flexibility limits provided in the ordinance.
That sounds fabulous.
Could you repeat that?
No.
Assist the commission in,
Assist the commission in determining whether a waiver is appropriate given the flexibility contained in the ordinance.
and I don't love the perfect example phrase, so let's strike that, because I feel like that's a very definitive statement, and so we can just say this is an example, and then continue. A good example or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on page 4?
Will you kill me if I add some?
No, because I'm going to add one too.
Okay,
So you go
good.
ahead first.
It's a big
I-
page.
It's a big
This one
page.
was, well, and I think part of it was for me, my concern was this first paragraph. It really condensed a lengthy discussion
It
where I
did.
thought that there was a lot of important things that were discussed in a very summary fashion. So with regards to the very first sentence starting on the last line 3, where it reads, "The commissioners mitigated these concerns by adding conditions to the approval," I would be more specific in terms of how we mitigated the specific concerns, because then you look down at the conditions and it's not clear. So here is how I would rephrase this sentence. I would say several commissioners discussed ways to mitigate these concerns, including by prohibiting the A1 truck disposal from backing onto Pages Lane, by including a sign clearly and permanently posted on the dumpster prohibiting backing onto Pages Lane, by posting a permanent no parking sign on the northernmost parking stall prohibiting parking on days or times when garbage pickup is scheduled, and by requiring the applicant and applicable HOA to schedule garbage pickup during off-peak foot traffic times. So I've really just repeated, for purposes of laying those out, conditions 4, 5, and 6. I think it's important to specify specifically those conditions that we discussed.
Well, and then maybe my comment of adding my concern there needs to happen before that, because I was concerned, and then we started discussing how to mitigate those concerns. So again, I feel like part of it is that it was a little bit summarized more than I felt comfortable with.
Can I make a suggestion? Just because it sounds like we are all struggling with that section.
Right.
Would you mind taking a look? I haven't gone back and listened to the audio, but maybe take another stab at fleshing out that part of the discussion, because by doing that, it may resolve a lot of the
Right.
concerns that we
Yeah.
have.
I think that's a very good idea. I think that's what's required is to do, for this section of the recording, pretty much a verbatim
Great.
transcription.
Great.
And just for your information, I've been instructed to summarize,
Yes,
just to keep the costs down,
okay.
because doing a verbatim transcription takes a little more time and
Right.
costs the city a little more money. But I agree with your comments that specificity is much better. And I will go that direction and discuss with Marcia
Great,
how to balance.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And on your specific, Shailene, I think we could even just move that sentence, "The commissioners mitigated these concerns," move it to the end of the paragraph, and with those additions that
Those
you just
additions.
said.
Yeah.
And then that puts it in the proper order.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make it clear what the conditions were that we discussed.
Yeah.
we could move
So
that
move that
sentence.
sentence down and add your,
Well, even,
Spec-
well, as long
specific.
as the last sentence, the Commissioner Daley said even, as long as that stays at the end, because we talked about the conditions and then,
even with
Sure.
those.
So
that we're
even
saying.
with those mitigation conditions.
I think that's a fair comment.
So maybe, and then just maybe putting my sentence up farther, I think, that I was concerned.
Okay.
Maybe that's better.
Okay. Anyone else before I give my less than substantive comment? And this, again, is something that I'd like to see carried over into other aspects of the minutes in the future. When we do hold a public hearing, we invite the public, of course, to come forward and give comment. Simply, in this case, we only had one person come forward, but the very last sentence on line 19 makes it sound like I cut it off after that one person. There's no way for anybody else that's reading these minutes to know if there were other people in the room. Perhaps we could preface that sentence by saying there being no other members of the public wishing to speak on this matter. Chair Hershey closed the public hearing at 7:41.
Very good.
Okay, anything on page 5? Page 6?
I have one thing on, and I put this down for page 6, but it might actually need to go somewhere else. After we'd had this whole long discussion about everything, and then we did finally get to the motions, before that final vote for this, on the CUP, after the motion was made, but before the final vote, I kind of explained my vote, right? And I don't know if this is the right spot to insert that in there, but I believe my words were that I believe that the CUP was the cause or source, I can't remember if they said cause or source, but one of the two, of the concerns that I had. And so I don't know if this is the right place to put that. Or
It is, and I would put a period after Commissioner Hurst, after she seconded. After the motion was made and seconded, Commissioner Daley.
Yeah, so I'd say Commissioner Daley expressed concern that, or, yeah.
Maybe explained.
Yeah, explained that he believes the CUP to be the source of the concerns discussed earlier. How's that?
It's great.
And you can also, anyway, doesn't matter.
And then I would go on to say, and following Commissioner Daley's comments, the vote was taken and the motion passed 6-1, with Commissioner Daley voting against the motion. Okay. Anything else on page 6? Page 7. I'm sorry. Does anyone have comment on 6? 7? On page 7 on line 4, I don't want to put words in your mouth on this, Commissioner Wright, but I don't think this sentence makes sense.
I don't either. I was actually going to, I actually went like this. And I thought, I've been so annoying today already. I'm just going to.
Annoy further.
So
What
you
what
go
did you make
ahead.
it
You
say?
go ahead and.
Oh, I was just going to say, make the issue of setbacks. I'm not sure a better way to say that,
Yeah, it
but
doesn't
I
sound
think there
right
is a
at
better
all.
way.
Why don't you take a stab at it? Since you raised the issue.
All right. Well, I would suggest something like this. Commissioner Wright said, or suggested the city
Consider property rights
right.
of property owners and neighboring property owners when addressing the issue of setbacks and heights for accessory buildings.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Did you get that, Luann?
I did not, but I will get it from the audio portion.
She probably in the audio portion said exactly what it says.
The audio portion of tonight or before?
Tonight.
Okay, good.
Tonight. Okay. Thank you. I would also like to suggest a change on line 9 where it says, Chair Hershey said the city is the applicant. I think I noted that the city is the applicant. Might be a little better there. Anything else on page 7? Page 8? Okay. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that to approve the Planning Commission minutes of the Wednesday, April 26th meeting as amended.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I
Any
missed
opposed?
the second.
It was
Sorry, not
I
me.
second. I
Commissioner
seconded.
Helgeson, I
Yes.
believe, second.
Oh,
And I will say nay. Given the substance of the revisions that we've asked staff to make, I would prefer to table these minutes and see the revisions that have been made to them before approving them.
I would like to amend my motion. Let's
Oh, you
move
can,
that we
You could move
rescind.
reconsideration of the motion.
Is that what I want to do?
That's what you want.
Okay, I would like to move to reconsider the motion to approve our minutes.
I will second that.
Been moved and seconded that we move for reconsideration of the motion to approve the minutes. All in favor of reconsidering that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The motion is effectively withdrawn. Would someone else like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we table the April 26th minutes to allow staff the opportunity to go back and review the audio and then recirculate revised minutes for our review and approval at our next Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the minutes be tabled yet again for consideration
Hey,
of the
these are
changes
different minutes
suggested
to
at this
table. These are
minute.
different ones. It's a different set.
It's a different set of minutes, true. Any discussion on the motion?
I think that's wise.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right.
So I am the commissioner. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm going to take a roll call vote on this. No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll get to report to Lisa that I'm proud of the commission. They handled it very well.
For purposes of informing the public of why we do this, it's important that we create a record of these meetings because these minutes are reviewed not only by you, the public who has access to these minutes, but also the city council reviews them as matters go before the city council for their final approval. Several of the things that we recommend, or several of the things that are contained in these minutes are recommendations from the Planning Commission to the City Council. So it is important that they have an accurate and complete record before them. So thank you for your patience in indulging us in that little constitutional exercise. The first agenda item tonight is scheduled to be a public hearing. It has to do with the Cheetos Johnson final subdivision at 1150 South, 240 East, initiated by Ron Marshall, applicant. And I'll turn the time over to the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner. So you guys have seen this one a few times now, the Cheetos Johnson subdivision at 1150 South, 240 East. It is a 9-lot single-family subdivision right south of Pages Lane. And at the preliminary approval a few weeks ago, there were just a few comments to be made about the temporary turnaround, the PUEs on the site to be recorded, and a few setback adjustments and construction drawings. Everything that needed to be amended on the plat has been finished. The only thing that's waiting approval is construction drawings to be signed off by Kevin Campbell, our city engineer. And Lisa, since she's out of town, has not given it her full and final review either. So there's just a few I's and T's to be crossed and dotted. But everything else on the plat itself, from my standpoint, seems to be ready to go. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Thank you. This matter, well, first of all, is the applicant here? Yes, Mr. Marshall. Do you have any comments that you'd like to give at this point?
No, I think said enough on it already. So.
Thank you. This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. Anyone wishing to come and speak on this matter may come forward at this time to either side and speak into the mic and introduce yourself for the record. Anyone wish to comment? Seeing no one running forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any further discussion or questions of the applicant or staff by the commissioners? Not, Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend approval to the City Council for the final subdivision plat for the Cheetos Johnson subdivision located at 1150 South, 240 East, subject to conditions 1 through 6. And the staff report with suggested reasons, for the action A through D.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? We'll go ahead and start with a roll call vote then. Commissioner Helgeson.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you. The next matter on the agenda is also scheduled to be a public hearing. This is a zone map amendment at approximately 525 West Lund Lane. Turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. As you've introduced the project, this is a rezone request, and this is a legislative decision. So this is the opportunity for you to debate the matter, host the hearing, and make a recommendation to the City Council. The property that's involved is this parcel located right here. This is the far north end of the city, the northwest area. Lund Lane is the top road, and the frontage road to the west, and you can see the freeway there. That property is the request of the owner in Brighton Homes as an agent to rezone this property from what is green, you see the green here, to a residential low, so AL to residential low, which is, you can see areas that have been rezoned in the past to RL. And you do have this Woods Park, which is a planned development. It's an RL, but does have a bonus density based on its design and the construction of our drainage pipe going under the UTA corridor. So that gives you kind of the setting of the rezone process. There's criteria the commission looks at. One of them is the guiding principles of the general plan, which staff in your report gave you a lengthy discussion about. The other items that you look at is what's going on in the surrounding area, is there available public utilities and so forth associated with that. So I'll just try to summarize the staff report rather than repeat it to you verbatim, but we'll start out with the general plan guidance. The areas north of Jennings Lane is a mixture of the agricultural zone and the residential low zone. If you look at the general plan history for the neighborhood, the concept that the city adopted for a guideline is that we are going to allow the agricultural uses to transition over time. It wasn't expected that we would just walk into this area as a citywide rezone, just label it a blanket RL, and leave it at that. North of Jennings Lane was to be incrementally developed over time. And there's two debating factors of that general plan. Part of it is we do have agricultural uses in the area. Now, our agricultural uses are generally fairly low-key. We don't have big hay production companies and things of that nature, but we do have folks that do have some homes and some land where you will see the use of some large animals, some cattle in a couple of areas, some horses is a common. We do have some sheep. The Garlicks have some sheep in this area. And so we do have several users of that area that have some lots with some agricultural uses. In the case of the specific property, its approval today is an AL development. It has a barn on the site and has been used for intermittent placement of horses on that particular property. The idea that the general plan debates by policy is how do you deal with an area that's transitory, or the issue of we're going to transition over time to future development. They explored the idea of, is this a truly agricultural area? Is this a productive agricultural area? And the general plan concluded that it's not. It takes 5 acres or more, according to the general plan, to consider it a truly agricultural rural use. And in that general plan, they said, a lot of the properties can be even smaller than that. In the general plan, it talked about that an acre was not really a great agricultural size, too large to take care of when somebody didn't want to do any of the production of animal keeping, too small. If you go down to half acre, too small to really subdivide after they tire of the uses. And so they established this clause that's not with absolute clarity. If you read the clause, it's called semi-rural. It says this is made up of semi-rural areas, traditionally acre, half-acre lots. It's not really truly agricultural uses. The city ought to consider adopting some type of semi-rural ordinance. Establish the boundaries of that ordinance and use that as the area that we want to keep semi-rural. And so the question is was it, we know it's not the 5 acres, because they weren't focusing on 5 acres in true agricultural production. We know that they reference in the general plan a ½ acre to an acre. Is that what they were associated with? And you could somewhat believe maybe the ordinance was built around this ½ acre to an acre size, but it does call out that an acre is, too large to take care of after, ½ acre is probably too small. So staff looked at it and we said, well, there's another clause in the same paragraph about semi-rural. The clause is don't limit the potential for future development. And in that, it talked about accessory dwellings. Now we know just recently we talked about accessory dwellings, and it didn't fruit into a very successful implementation, denied by the council in the end. It also talked about small PUDs. So it seems difficult that you would have a small PUD on a ½ acre parcel for development. And so staff's interpreted that you have, well, and the last element is that we're going to preserve it for the current property owners. But it doesn't say we're going to preserve it forever into the future. Just preserve it for the current property owners. So our position in reading the general plan language is, first they wanted to protect some of the agricultural uses for a period of time, but expected that those would transition over time into future development. The interesting part is that we've never developed the semi-rural parameters. And this has been in the plan since 1985. In 2003, the city revamped its entire zoning ordinance, and once again, for whatever reason, I get to excuse, it was somebody before me, but for whatever reason, the semi-rural parameters and development of what that meant has not taken place. So the view of staff with an application is that hasn't risen to a priority for preservation of certain specific areas. What would be the terms? What would be the parameters? What would be setting the lot sizes? What would be setting the expectations of homes, the keeping of animals? We did not come up with a huge parameter of that. And in the second half, it says don't limit future development. So staff's position is that the AL is in place until it's time to transition to the RL zone. And so we do not think that leaving it agricultural meets the expectations of a semi-rural definition because it hasn't been developed and decided what that parameter is. And it does say don't limit future development and consider accessory buildings and small PUDs. So the request from our standpoint is it does very clearly say this area is to be low density. So when you look at what the base density of Centerville is, it's 4 units an acre. That's quarter-acre lots, not half-acre lots. However, we do recognize that less than 4 units an acre is still considered low density. So the request of AL or the request of RL maintains the parameter that the base of Centerville is low density. So we don't feel the request is in conflict with the policy of the general plan. So we think it's consistent at this point in time with the caveat that there was some possibility into the future of looking at semi-rural ideas. When we look at the other parameters of what's happening, services, other elements that involve in your rezone, if you look a little bit broader at what's going on in the city's master plan, we have a streets master plan. And this is 400 West. And 400 West in the master plan is to connect to Lund Lane. That's the goal of the future. Make a connection of 400 West to Lund Lane. How do you facilitate a connection? Through development. Through development, you facilitate that connection. And so we believe that the expectation is in order to connect the 400 West to Lund Lane, you'll be transitioning to the RL as a base density, which is really what this neighborhood plans policies are about. Typically, what's interesting about this is typically it follows the old Bamberger rail line. It offsets and adjusts if you look at it, but essentially that's what you're seeing is the old rail bed is what 400 West is roughly aligned with. So if we zoom in close to here to Lund Lane, the next door neighboring property is where this area between these two lines for this parcel, it kind of looks like a flag lot stem. That's wide enough for that collector road. We'd be a 66-foot right away. So we generally could still use that rail bed line for that connection. However, if we go over to Bountiful, I'm on the right, Farmington.
Welcome to Centerville.
Yeah, welcome to Centerville. That's where have I been at? I'm at Pages Lane still from the previous hour. We look at the Bountiful, and they have a local road. This is not a master planned road. In this case, it's a local road of subdivision. We don't know whether Bountiful intends to connect that.
That's Farmington.
I said it again. Farmington. We don't know if Farmington plans a master plan connection of that local road, but it could be. And that's where you start having the issue of alignments of the connection. You start looking at how roads connect and to make sure we have the proper left-hand turns. So you could offset from the rail line to Farmington and move that road a little further east to line up with that potential. That's a possibility. The other element is you could offset it. If you can see where the road is coming here, if that alignment just stayed straight and didn't serpentine slightly, it would run into somewhere through this property to make its connection. So there are issues of alignment for future, and what staff brings that up to is there is an expectation that if this were rezoned and somebody came in with a plan to develop the property, which is their intention, staff intends, and the city should, the general plan intends, is in consideration of that development, how and what should that master plan road be considered as? Is this property part of that discussion? So I bring that up because that changes the dynamics of how many lots you're going to get and what kind of infrastructure has to be implemented. Staff is not a position that this is a no to a rezone. Staff is just raising, this is our expectation. We're going to rezone from AL to the RL and start making these road connections. The other, I didn't bring it up in the report, but you can see the aerial. Here's a local connection from the Woods Park development. This local connection could go east, so any subdivision that comes into this area, we're going to begin to look at making that connection. It could go directly east and hit that this old rail bed. It could 90 and turn and head up. I mean, there's a myriad of ways of doing that. But those are part of the discussions, and in the future, if a project comes in, we'll be asking those questions and considering those connections as part of any project. And I'm just trying to show that this parcel is strategically placed to have those kind of discussions. The other element is along Lund Lane, we take Pine Creek water down the southern side of Lund Lane. The Woods Park put in a 36-inch pipe for their frontage here, and it splits two directions, partly to the north and partly on the overflow to the south, to hit our pipes going out west under the freeway and the railroad track areas. The expectation is if this is rezoned, there is off-site improvements. That's not unusual to have off-site improvements. But I just bring the disclosure of anybody buying or developing this property. If it moves forward, they would be required to not only build their improvements here, but those improvements have to connect. And if the property to the west is not being developed, we have enough right-of-way, they would be extending those off-site improvements to connect to the Woods Park to handle the floodwater and the water line extensions that are needed. And that will add additional cost to developing this property and lessen if and when the property to the west ever develops, and how will the drainage impact fees and so forth be dispersed. So I bring it up that there is some off-site improvements that would have to be made. We have to talk about the extension of roads. I went over the general plan language for you. So according to the policies of the city ordinances, we don't believe that the request is in conflict, that conflicts with those policies. But, you know, be it known that this property is a strategic place for some of these connections into the future. So we're recommending you consider a rezoned recommendation to the council.
Thank you, Corey. Questions for staff?
I have a couple questions. So in the picture that says the parcel to be rezoned, I just want to clarify, it's just that one,
Yep.
just that one
Just
parcel?
that parcel. So it's this wedge, trapezoidal shape, whatever the official term is.
And everything else would remain
Yeah,
agricultural?
agricultural.
Low, so we're just talking about that one, okay.
Just that parcel right now.
Great, thank you.
How
The
ma-
second,
How many acres is that?
Go ahead.
While you're on that point? 1.6?
1.61.
Okay. Sorry.
second question, more of just like a discuss, maybe a further discussion about the 400 West connection. If that's in our general plan and that's something that we'd like to do as a city, it doesn't necessarily follow that it has to connect to any other street in Farmington, but it's just to Lund Lane. I mean, that is Lund Lane, that is the end of our city.
Right.
So we don't really necessarily have to look ahead and say, oh, does it jog over to meet this perfect place in Farmington because.
Well, it does. Our city engineer will look at the traffic and the accesses. This is a joint street between the two cities of Farmington and Centerville. You get that right?
Right,
And
but does it expressly say that in our master plan that we
No,
want
but
to do
in your
that?
development of the property, at any point in time, that issue will be raised. So the general plan doesn't address accommodating other city streets, but your city engineer will look at other connections to that street and make a recommendation on you. And that stub road has been part of previous discussions in the past.
Okay, so hypothetically, if that's something that we look at, how does that benefit the residents along 400 West, or how does it benefit anyone in Centerville to have the 400 West Street continue on in through Farmington?
You have, it's the conflicting left turns that you're trying to avoid. So as
Can you
those streets
explain that?
cross and come close to each other, you have conflicting left-hand turns that are occurring. And so engineers will line those roads up or offset them a distance so that you don't have left turns running into each other.
But as it stands now, there's no conflicting left turns.
As it stands now, no. So if this development went through, and let's say it is the Bamberger alignment
Right,
and
right.
gets built, and the other one doesn't, then Farmington will probably raise the issue as they see projects happening and not want those conflicting left turns. And since the city is a part of that process on their southern border, we would be sending concerns about conflicting left turns.
Thank you.
Corey, can you remind me, if you zoom out just a little bit, not quite that much. Okay. My recollection, and remind me if I'm thinking of the wrong place, didn't we have the property that's directly to the east? Didn't that come to us with a requested rezone for residential low? Because my recollection is that we had approved the city council that that be rezoned as
Yes.
residential low. I thought it.
They denied it.
They turned it down.
I had not been aware of that. I guess I was kind of surprised to hear that. Can you remind me, or actually just tell me, what the reason was that the city council was concerned and why they denied that rezone?
I think there's two factors that I can recall from that discussion. The first one is that the southern adjoining property owner was present and raised concerns about the impacts of development to his property. And their goal was to maintain their property in kind of the agricultural state and didn't want any encroachment issues associated with that. So I think there was a specific response to some public comment, but I also think it was a broader response from some of the council members that they did look at Main Street in this corner, and you certainly see you have some large parcels here and some long fields, and they do have that rural appeal that agricultural, but you know, all that white vinyl fencing, the horses into the pasture, and that's an identity issue that they felt that they wanted to try to somehow keep and maintain with the half-acre lot zoning rather than an RL zoning.
Can I also state that I voted against that. I was, I think, the only one. It was one of the very first commission meetings I had, because they had presented a plan that had given them residential low, but it was pretty much half-acre lots, and they were...
Yeah, it was like 0.4 acre lots.
It was like just almost half-acre lots. I think they were even closer than 0.4, but part of the reason why I was uncomfortable with it is that it seemed to be pretty much agricultural low, which is a half-acre lot, but then they were asking for the rezone, and we felt like, at least I felt like it was similar to the Hafoka property, where the rezone was given and then the plan changed, and pretty soon there were lots more houses than what they had originally showed. And so
yeah, it is
they
true
they could have achieved that same plan almost without that rezone. So I just wanted to state that's why I was uncomfortable with it initially.
Corey, I have a question for you, just to help remind us. So residential development in agricultural low is 2 units per acre.
Correct. Half-acre lot minimums. There's no gross density. Your net lot, no matter what you build, has to be a half-acre.
Half-acre. And there's no conditional use?
No conditional use. The top of that is strictly half-acre zoning.
And then for residential low, it's 4 units per acre net.
Net, so it's 4 units an acre gross. You'll net out just a little bit less than that when you build your roads, but it's still maxed at 4 units an acre. There's no second conditional use category.
There's no conditional use for residential low?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for staff? Thank you. Would ask the applicant to come forward at this time, and if they'd like to make a statement.
Sorry, it's pretty straightforward from what you've heard already.
Could you state your name, please?
Sorry, my name is Sean Poor, and I'm with Brighton Homes. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward from what you've heard already. We're looking at 6 residential lots on the property, which is just above a 1/4 acre lot for each of those lots. We're anticipating having to work with the city staff for that road, and are more than willing to work with them on that. And we've looked through the master plan, and the property, the size and shape of the property lends itself towards our road being oriented to line up with that of 400. So we fully anticipate working with staff to come to a solution that works both now and along with the future in the master plan.
Questions for the applicant?
So do you own more than that parcel?
No, so we represent the owner of just this parcel specifically.
So that parcel doesn't include that Bamberger line, though?
Right, and we plan on being in contact with surrounding property owners depending on what city staff recommends.
So is the road going to go through the middle of the I'm assuming you'll line it up so it works with the configuration for the 6 homes, but I guess you'll have a road that will go through that will not be in the Bamberger right-of-way.
Well, there's a few options. If we would like it to be along that rail line, depending on how the conversations with the property owner go. We're also looking at putting it adjacent to that rail line on this parcel, if that property owner is not open to a discussion on that.
Thank you.
In planning whatever it is that you're planning on this parcel, have you given some consideration as to then what potential uses would be left with that parcel on the west side, that long, skinny parcel?
So we have looked at it, and as mentioned by Corey, there's a road coming from that community which would allow for at least 2 lots to be divided out of that existing lot, but and there is possibility of reconfiguring our parcel and moving the road over to an additional side, depending on what city staff recommends for the future of 400 there, to make development of that parcel more accessible in the future.
Yeah, the layouts would, you could do here if they were, you could place it here, or you could place it along this western edge, depending on where we study those connections, appropriate connections should be.
I guess I'm just looking at that property, wondering what if, either way, whether you put the road where the old Bamberger line is or the other way, what does that leave in terms of your ability to do anything with that remaining parcel?
Well, and I'm sort of confused as to why they had that exit of the PUD, or is it considered?
Because you're at 29 homes, and it has a single entrance.
So it's
and
required
we
to have
require,
double.
now this was a PDO, so
PDO.
we stubbed a future exit, but you technically don't have a one exit for more than 20 units.
Do surrounding property owners who redevelop are they required to consider that exit?
Your subdivision ordinance always looks at surrounding connections to roads for local roads and determines how you weigh in on an approval for connections to surrounding roads.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
This matter's been scheduled for a public hearing. Invite anyone who would like to come forward and speak on this issue to come forward at this time. Either mic, please state your name for the record.
My name is Bill Wright. I live at 415 West Lund Lane. I'm the owner of the Bamberger property. The road.
There's a pointer right
My
there
house. Where's that? Right here.
Right here.
Right.
on the ledge.
In front of Luann.
It's the high-tech dowel pointer.
I own this property and this property over to Woods Park. That's my house. I've been there 32 years. My concern is, and I don't know the brother from Brighton, are those single-family homes that are going in there? Yes. Okay. The Woods Park, they raised that a foot above the frontage road. So Mr. Evans, me, and the Garlicks get all the runoff from this side of Woods Park and from all of this side, off the roofs and everything, the drainage that's there. I have pictures of it during the 2-inch rainstorm this summer. Nothing runs out the drainage. And some of the drainage sits above the grass. It's just one round drain. So none of that works. So as of last year in the winter, I had flooding into my fruit room and stuff on this side of the house. And I never had it for 30 years. And then this year I had it again. The mayor and Randy all know about it, and Brother Snyder knows about it. I don't want this property raised up. Is that going to be a foot from the frontage road also, a foot above the frontage road?
They'll look at that during the process.
Okay, because this property is a little bit higher than mine now, and I get some runoff in the winter into my field. And we've had this other issue that it's not resolved with Oakwood Homes. And I haven't talked to these guys about selling my property. So that's my issue. I don't want any more flooding into my home. And I'm the only, and the Garlicks have flooding too, because all the let me show you here. On these lots, where the garage is, it drains down to the field and drains down to the field. And none of it goes anywhere except into our property. And we've had 6-8 inches of water this winter on my garden and that field. So that's my issue with it.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Anyone else like to speak on this matter?
I'm Rebecca Garlic Price. I'm the daughter of the parents that live in Garlic property. They, as Bill said, they are having drainage issues as well. They aren't having flooding because my father has worked tirelessly over the last few months or longer to fix the drainage on our property to help drain the Woods Park issue that has not been resolved and is not draining properly. And so D. Evans and Bill Wright, their properties are being flooded, but so are our parents. My dad's been the one that has had to pay out of pocket for the drainage Woods Park so that we don't have flooding in our basement, in their basement. And we would have the same concern if you raise that property, that we will have more drainage issue and more flooding in our areas for our livestock in our fields. So.
Thank you, Ms. Garlick.
I'm Allison Garlick, and I actually live at 2164 North Frontage Road with my parents at the moment. And yes, obviously there's been drainage issues. My concern, and would love for each of you to really consider and really think about, is the opportunity of this property. Obviously, it's agricultural low, and obviously there's stated, as Mr. Schneider has stated, that there is a future time when that needs to be developed. My question is, does that have to be right now? Does that have to be right now? Living in Centerville for probably about 17 to 18 years now, that was the reason that my parents moved to Centerville, not necessarily for agricultural pursuits. That kind of came as an accident. But they saw a great opportunity for their kids there. And that's what I love about Centerville, is that there's a lot of diversity there. And eventually that is going to change. And at some point it might have to change. But does that change have to be right now? Are we getting to the point where we have to grow up right at this very moment? Or are we going to allow some more opportunity to see what happens and to see what we can bring? Just with the small property that we own, that my parents own, and what we do with it, we've met more people in Centerville, Bountiful, and Farmington, and even into Kaysville, Syracuse, and West Haven, than if we didn't have that property and if we didn't have it as agricultural low. So my, I guess, concern is what we will be losing. Are we trying to gain financial growth, or are we trying to gain community growth? And everything that I've been taught from elementary school to college is that when we keep our choices open, that is more important growth than whether or not we are trying to fit as many houses into Centerville as we can. So I would just ask that you take that into consideration, that yes, eventually that is probably the future of Centerville, is to allow more people to come into it. But there has been a lot of good with what it is. And I know that it can still have that lot of good for a few more years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Higley. I own the property that we're talking about. I've owned the property for over 20 years. I live in Centerville. I've been trying to actively sell this property for about 6 to 8 months now. I've had several people that have been interested in it, but due to the fact that the utilities are where they are, it is cost prohibitive to put a single house on this property. The utilities, as they stand right now, are right here on this corner. In order for me to develop this property and put a single house on here, I have to provide utilities that the city requires past this property and all the way to the east corner of that property. In discussions with the city, I've been told that that's going to cost upwards of $150,000 to $200,000. When I ask for the sales price of that, and then I tell someone who is interested in building a single dwelling on that house, on that property, that they're not only going to have to pay the price that I'm asking, but they're going to have to put $200,000 worth of improvement on that property, it becomes cost prohibitive. The other problem that I have in this property is that with Woods Park here, the precedent has been set. The precedent has been set. The future has happened. Progress is going forward. These are lots that are less than 0.2 acres. I hate to hear my neighbors have had flooding issues and things like that, but that seems to me like that would be a city issue that should be addressed with that subdivision. It has nothing to do with my property. We're asking for this property to be rezoned as residential light. When we do that, this is going to be improved with the curb and gutter, the subsurface drain, culinary water, electrical, and some more stuff, secondary water. Also, the city is going to have the advantage of having this whole 400 feet worth of frontage improved with the same stuff. So as the master plan shows and has stated that we're moving toward residential light, this is going to be not only advantageous for me to be able to sell my property, but for the city to be able to move forward and get improvements on their community at the cost of a developer. Also, my next door neighbors are going to realize improvement and value, added value in their property, because those very utilities that I or the developer are going to have to pay for are going to be now in front of their house, in front of their property. So it's a win for them. I'm not asking for the lifestyles of all these other surrounding properties to be changed. I'm not asking for them to be rezoned. I'm simply asking for me to be able to find a way to sell this property that will make sense not only to me, but that would be economically feasible for a developer and have nice homes brought in that make sense to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higley.
My name's Dee Evans. I own that piece of property. Corey, what is your name? Corey, or what's your real name? Would you please tell me, because I like to try and coincide names with what you signed papers.
My given name is Corvin. My nickname is Corey.
So you signed papers, Corvin? Okay, wanted to know. I've had issues with Mr. Higley that was just up here. Matter of fact, he's in a plea of abeyance until May 26th.
Let's keep our comments,
Because
let's keep our comments relevant to the zoning.
I own this property, I'm being flooded by these homes. Drainage does not work. This property's not for sale, won't be for a long time. They just barely built this shed. They only have 110, 12 feet of frontage. And you guys want to rezone it to low whatever? How? How are they going to do that without everybody else getting on board? It's not going to happen. Not while I own that property, and I'm not selling it. We've had probably 4 real estate developers come and already ask us about selling our property and Bill's property. You know what our answer's been? No. We're not developing it. Mr. Higley can dream all he wants. He just barely built this shed that you referred to as a horse barn. I guarantee a horse has never been in that barn. Has cement floors, doesn't it? Cement floors, power, direct TV, man. He actually lived in it for a while when his wife kicks him out, but that's for them. I don't think you guys really understand what's going on. Hawks was a property east of that you guys were talking earlier about. The smallest acre was 0.46. You guys said, okay, let's do it. City said no. We're leaving it ½ acre or better. That's what we want down there. It's what all the ones around there want, except for one person. So you guys can make your plan whatever you want. We can dream up future for whatever. The world could end tomorrow. Then we wouldn't have to worry about any of this. But as of right now, you're throwing apples against flipping nothing. It's a waste of time. You guys talked earlier about garbage trucks. How are you going to put a garbage truck through 100-foot frontage and build 6 homes on there? That's what you're talking? You want to rezone a 1.6 acres when there's a whole bunch of land around it that nobody wants? That's what I would ask yourselves. We shut that Hawks property got shut down. They actually were in a conjunction together for a green belt, so they didn't have to pay their damn taxes until Hawks sold out, and now he's got to pay his full taxes, so he's boo-hooing, wants to sell his land. Well, that's too bad. He never paid a penny for it.
Let's keep the comments relevant, please.
All right. Any more comments you'd like to hear from me? Sorry,
No.
a little pissed off about this. The guy comes on my land and threatens my life. I'm a little pissed off.
Okay. Keep your comments civil, please. Do you have anything more for us?
Yeah, but I probably better not say it.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Trish Evans. I, with my husband, own that narrow piece of land that you referred to. A third of our lot is underwater because of the drainage off of this subdivision. We can't pasture our cows on our pasture because it is flooded. And the city hasn't done a damn thing about it to resolve it.
Keep your language civil, please.
So we are extremely against rezoning John Higley's piece of land because you're going to build it up and you're going to flood us out further. And we shouldn't have to pay the price for this subdivision or John Higley's land to be developed. We shouldn't have to pay the price, and that's what we're doing. It is costing us money to not be able to use our pasture to put our cows out to pasture. We have to fill our hay barn full of hay, and it costs us money that we shouldn't have to be paying for our pasture that we should be able to use. But we can't use our property because you allowed this planned development that was very poorly planned. And all as I have to say is shame on this commission for allowing something like that to happen. Because when you go and you look in the backyards of these places, their drains stick this far up above the grass. How does the water drain through the grass and get up high enough to get to that drain? It doesn't. It drains on my property. It drains on Bill's. It drains on the Garlicks. We're the ones paying the price for all these homes. And shame on this commission if you allow this to happen any further.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
My name is Heather Garlick Healy. My parents own the lot there on the frontage road, and my husband and I live at 387 West, 1125 North here in Centerville. My biggest concern about rezoning this is originally the Woods Park subdivision was rezoned from agricultural low to residential low. And the original plan that was put before the commission and the committee was that they would do quarter-acre lots, and then they did a high-density overlay. And now there are 29 homes in that little corner behind my parents. Now, we've made do. The drainage is not up to par. It's not what they said it would be. And we are paying the price for the drainage. But like my little sister said, our parents knew that the drainage was going to be an issue, and so my dad had enough forethought to put some new drainage along the entire length of their property. He's finishing that this summer because we have about 7 inches of water in our horse pasture right now. And so drainage is an issue, but my biggest issue is say we rezone it to residential low. What guarantee do we have that they're not going to put a high density overlay on it and try and put more homes in that 1.61 acres than what they're telling us right now? That is one of my biggest concerns. The other concern is I know that they say that in order to have a good agricultural experience, you need 5 acres. We only have about 2.5 acres. And the agricultural experience that we have and that we were raised on and that my kids get to go over and experience at their grandparents' house is incredible. And we are fortunate enough that we get to share it with much of Davis County. Reading Elementary comes over to my parents' house every year. Their kindergartners are coming over on the 18th of this month so that they can learn where it is their food comes from, why chickens lay eggs and where their eggs come from. They don't just come from the grocery store. We take our animals over to Reading Elementary. We took them to Centerville Elementary. We take them to an elementary in Bountiful to help kids have that kind of an experience because the land is disappearing faster and faster. And we're starving this generation of the opportunity to get their hands dirty, to be able to work, and to be able to understand what it takes to get things out of the land. That's my concern, is why do we all of a sudden right now have to change it? And what guarantee do we have that they're only going to put 6 houses on that property and that they're not going to try and push for more? So those, I guess, are my biggest. Like I said, the Woods Park subdivision, it's not what we'd hoped for. And we're dealing with some of the runoff, but we were pretty lucky. We got some pretty great neighbors in that subdivision to kind of put up with us and help us along the way. But we are a little worried about rezoning more and more of the stuff around us because we might not get so lucky next time.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Bowen. I don't know that I have a whole lot more productive things to add, but I do want to just give my opinion. I am one of the residents of Woods Park, and so I have benefited tremendously from the commission being willing to allow that type of a subdivision to go in. However, we have seen firsthand the problems that it has caused. The Wrights and the Garlicks have probably suffered more than anyone I've ever seen as far as having us move in there, but they have treated us more kindly than we ever could have expected someone to treat us. They've accepted us, which is what those types of residents is why we moved to Centerville, was because of these type of people. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents. For what it's worth, it's not coming from an educated position, because I know Mr. Snyder does a fantastic job of his due diligence. I've commended him on the city's forethought of what they've been doing. The thought was good for Woods Park. It was not carried out correctly by the builder, and that I don't blame the commission for it, and I don't think the commission should be blamed for it, because I feel like there was a plan in place It just wasn't executed the way it was supposed to by those who should have done it, not the city's fault. And I think that there is going to be hopefully some correction for the Wrights and for the Garlicks. But I would just, my comment would be, these are our citizens of Centerville, longstanding citizens who have had to put up with a lot because of us moving in there, and I think their opinions should hold weight, a considerable amount of weight as you consider this. And that's, again, as I mentioned, not coming from an educated position, just from a position of appreciation for their hospitality and the city's hospitality for accepting us. And so take that for what it's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much for your comments.
Mr. Chair, before you debate, can I give you an update on the drainage issue?
Yes, please.
Woods Park has not finalized their improvement plan with the city yet. They ran into some problems earlier last summer, and so they have not closed out the development of infrastructure in their project. Part of that system is the land drain. There's an intent for the land drain to pick it up, the drainage of the issue, and it's functioning by connection, but it's not functioning picking up all the drainage as of yet. It is the city engineer and the drainage utility manager looked at the site. There is very little, if not any, drainage occurring from the subdivision onto the property. They've checked the roads, the drain systems, and everything else. Now, that's not to say that the sprinkler systems may not overspray a property line or something of that nature and get some water on it. But the storm drainage for the subdivision is not off-siting to either properties. What you're seeing is that this is the natural drainage area, and it did travel through the Woods Park subdivision topography out to the frontage road. You're seeing a fill take place under FEMA based on fill. It interrupts that drainage, that natural drainage. So you're seeing the upper waters come to, lack of better terms, a dam area. What was to be installed along this property line was the land drains. They've installed the land drains, but they've also graded some of the backyards where you're not making the connection for the water and the land drains tying up together. That is on a punch list with the city engineer from last year to finish up. He's gone out recently to shoot the land drain installations and believes they're probably correct, but have to be regraded so that the water will hit the land drain and not back up like you've been seeing that's occurring there. So the project's not finished. Hopefully those fixes and check items will capture that water and move it off site. So the city's aware, the developer is aware. It was taken over by 2 different agencies, and so they're going back through the improvement plans to try to fix that. So yes, acknowledgement, there's not all of the water moving like it's supposed to, but they have not finished their project either. They have had 18 months, put in a delay for the winter season. So I see the solutions were is they'll regrade some of that back area so that the water hits it. They might install some additional land drains to pick up that water. I know there's been an offer to Mr. Evans to install a separate drain line to take some of that water, and that discussion has not fruited to a decision with Mr. Evans on that. So there are some problems, so I don't want to ignore the problem, but we're also not at a point to say it's closed and we still have a problem. So there's anticipation on the Public Works Director, Engineer, and Drainage Utility Manager that if we work through this spring, hit those punch lists, it may be some talking to Mr. Evans and others to see if an extension of a drain line can be installed for them, but we anticipate there will be a solution to that concern.
Are the development bonds still in place then?
Yes.
Okay.
A couple more questions about that.
Go ahead.
If anyone has been required to, if anyone sustained damages or has been required to do personal improvements on their property, will they, will those costs be mitigated for those?
If there is something done by the city, they can register a claim with the city. If it's something done by a private entity, then their claim is against that private entity.
So there could be a claim from the surrounding property owners against the builder of Woods Park, is what you're
Correct.
saying?
Or there could be a claim against the city, depending on how all the investigation comes out. The city's position is we're still holding bond to correct those elements and expect those to be done when they close out that bond.
Who's the builder again?
It is now Oakwood Homes.
Was it someone before?
Yeah, I went through Prince Development to, Oakwood Homes was in a merger with Jack Fisher and some other elements, and then it was eventually sold, and the Jack Fisher Oakwood Homes division took place, and the Oakwood Homes ended up taking control of the property.
Do we as a city have any recourse against the builder if they don't fulfill, or is that only through private property?
No, with the bond amount, we have
Okay.
our recourse. Now, once we close out that bond, then there would be a determination whether the city followed the construction plans or not. But
Okay.
we have not finished that process yet.
And when's that, 18 more months?
They were on extension through the winter, so we anticipate this summer they'll close out. They have to repave part of Lund at Pools, at Lund Lane at the intersection. There's a pooling problem there, and there's some other tie-up lists on the infrastructure that the city engineers
Okay.
put on as a punch list.
Thank you.
Corey, when was this Woods Park development put in?
Approved. When was it approved?
Yeah, when
Well,
was
it's been approved for a little while, went through the sales, and then eventually they had to perform some grading and drainage issues. The reason that there's the extra homes from the quarter-acre lot concept is that the project, all of this area, all of the property owners in this area were in a floodplain. Pine Creek came down and the natural storm drainage from the properties came down, stopped at the corner and backloaded all of those properties. So flooding has been a long-term problem for more than just the Woods Park. All of those property owners experienced problems with the water stopping and not being able to get underneath the freeway. So the advantage of the Woods Park, right or wrong is the debate, we hear it all the time, but the advantage of Woods Park is in the rezone, they discussed the issue of adequate utilities. And the Woods Park developer committed that they would participate in installing the pipe under, because we have two 24-inch pipes that feed under the freeway. The main drainage went under the UTA, Union Pacific Rail. That was too small and partially collapsed. And so it was going to continue to flood. Pine Creek was going to continue to flood it as well as the storm drain of the properties. And so the extra 3 units were put in place to help offset the cost. It's a $300,000 job. The developer put in $150,000, and the city, using our drainage and storm drainage management impact fees, paid the other $150,000 and installed the pipe that took care of the water. So now we take care of the majority of the water that's coming out of Pine Creek. What you see the complaint about is the regular storm water on the surface is supposed to hit those land drains and then go back into the detention, then go underneath that pipe, and that has not been resolved yet.
So Corey, are you saying that it was flooded before?
Oh yeah, it's a floodplain. It's a FEMA map floodplain.
It may be a floodplain, but, I mean, from the property owners, it wasn't flooded before.
It flooded, I can't say how often, but it flooded regularly with the Pine Creek not being able to flow. And it depends on how much Pine Creek water is carrying each year.
So is the Higley property also floodplain? It's lower in elevation, I'm assuming? than
The
Woods
floodplain
Park?
reached up to, and I don't know all the boundaries, but the majority of the floodplain was this corner because it backed up with Pine Creek.
I've seen standing water there previously. I guess I'm just wondering what the elevation difference is. I can see some concern if it also has to be built up, that, then can the drainage be mitigated, especially for the narrow parcel?
Well, that's what I mentioned into the rezone. The land drains are the way you handle that surface water, and those get installed, and they'll always be installed as property develops. A lot of your area here in Centerville, before we even built the debris basin, have land drains in them. And so a lot of your subdivisions throughout the city do have some land drains. Typically, cities don't like those because you have this whole battle. If a subdivision puts it in as a private improvement and it fails, what do you do? So the city actually owns several land drains inside of developments and regularly maintains those land drains. Otherwise, much of Centerville couldn't be developed west of Main Street. You have a huge land drain sitting in the Walmart development. So land drains is the way you manage it, and that's what we point out in the staff report. These are areas sensitive to that stormwater management, and that's why due diligence is needed as you plan the construction drawings and connections to the storm drain water system.
Before we proceed with further questions, we do need to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to the public comments. So I'm going to ask the applicant if you'd like to respond, come forward at this time.
I'm just listening to a majority of the comments as you've been discussing. A lot of them are about the water and drainage issues, and we're happy to work with the city in whatever direction they deem necessary based on their previous experience with this development, and maybe there's a more advantageous way of installing the improvements and working through the issues in order to make sure that we don't have a similar issue going forward, depending on what needs to happen to prevent that even from happening in the short term. And just to reiterate what the property owner said, we will be adding the benefit of pulling utilities and at our cost doing the improvements to the street that is part of the master plan to connect up to Farmington there. So we want to work with the city and do what you guys want for the future of your city, as well as work with the surrounding property owners to make sure that their concerns are mitigated where possible. So,
questions for the applicant? I have one that was raised by Mr. Evans, and I think it's a question that concerned me too, and that was, with the limited amount of frontage that you have on Lund Lane, and with the other stub to the adjoining subdivision to the west, was not adjoining, that's the problem. The other stub isn't adjoining, and so there's no secondary access available in yours either, which is not required because it's less than 20 lots. But nonetheless, my concern is where, if you were just left with the piece that's being rezoned right now without being able to acquire any land on the east or the west, how do you structure your access road in such a way to maintain the necessary lot sizes and frontages?
So we would have to kind of work around depending on which streets and where the city staff would like our street to be. Obviously, we anticipate that there is going to be a few odd-shaped lots that might end up in the front of the property due to the narrowness of the frontage if the road does end up needing to come out at that exact point, which we anticipate it will. But we're going to work through whatever issues we can to make sure that we can have not just the amount of lots that we're looking for, but also lots that make sense and that are usable.
And so it'd be your position tonight that while you may have some different shaped lots in order to achieve the road entrance, all of the 6 lots would meet our present standards for size and access and frontage, right?
Yes. We plan on fully adhering to the zoning that we're trying to achieve.
Other questions for the applicant?
Is there, it's not always typical to include a preliminary site plan or anything, but is there a reason why you chose not to do that? with this request? I mean, how far in the development stages are you?
So we're pretty preliminary. Like I said earlier, we are still trying to work out the logistics of the road and surrounding property owners and where the city staff would like the street. With that many variables, we felt it would be better if we worked through the rezone before assuming a location of where that street would be and how it would connect to the surrounding properties.
Again, it's not required, but it sometimes is helpful when we've had previous rezones to see how some of these issues, when we're hesitant about some of these issues, it does bring some clarity to some of these issues so that we could see, oh yes, this can work out this way or the other way. Just something to think about.
Okay, great.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Turn the time then over to the commissioners for comment or a motion.
Corey, I have a question for you. What's the minimum road width that would be permitted? Because I'm assuming we got to stick a road in here somewhere if we're going to do 6 lots, right? So
Yes, there'll be a future road in there. I think the city would look approximately the minimum for the collector to be a 60-foot wide right-of-way, and that would include back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk. Now, having said that, this property would likely, let's just pretend it's somewhere along this property line, just for the sake of arguing on that particular road. We could do it the same on this property line. It's just, this is kind of the natural hope that it goes to Bamberger right-of-way. They would create a new right-of-way line wherever that sits to begin the lot. So on that, they'd set that line, and then to the east, in the case of this example, they would set the sidewalk width, the park strip width, the curb and gutter width, and the street. But that's all they would have to build. The other side, that would be curb and gutter, park strip, and sidewalk, would be likely pushed to the other property owner when they want to develop. So you would get a...
That develop on the west.
Yeah, if you develop on the west, the similar situation would happen. Now the east side curb gutter would be in, and then the pavement would end at the property line, and the next property owner would pick up the curb gutter, the park strip, and the sidewalk.
Are you going to require them, I recognize the one parcel's not for sale, but you've got this connecting road. Are you going to require Brighton to, maybe through that shed area, place the road that would eventually connect?
That's part of the layout discussions, and that's where, it's hard for staff because, can 6 lots be developed? I don't know. Maybe with the constraints, it eats too much in, and maybe it's actually only 5 lots by the time you pass it out. So, you have the density of potential for a little over 6 units, but by the time you do the alignments, the improvements, and the connections, the layout might end up back at 5, for all I know.
Corey, that's where I was going with my question about the road. If you go a 60-foot road and then you only get to count half of that towards your density.
Well, they would include all of what they've constructed up to the new curb line, so that would count towards their density. They would get the whole road because that would be on their property. So the next line or across doesn't get the density to the half road because it was constructed on someone else's property.
Well, but even so, if you take that whole road, I guess so, but then you're going to do, and if you do 2 roads there, you're not getting 6 lots in.
Yeah, and I think that's the risk that they're taking, and whether it's feasible or cost effective to go to 6 with all the constraints. And then it's the private matter between the property owner and the developer on the contracted cost of the property. But I do think that there's one valid comment made by the property owner. Whether this is 1 house, 5 houses, 4 houses, or 6 houses, all of that infrastructure, at least for 1 house from here to there, has to be installed just for 1 house. So it remains undeveloped unless somehow price levels, and again, it's only valuable what somebody's willing to pay for. But there is a significant improvement from this corner on the east side to make your connection here. You know, subtracting out, I think the city engineer in the meeting said, yeah, you could be $75,000, $100,000 worth of improvements just for the one house. Now, if you add in another road that has to be developed, now you're substantially raising the cost to build that new road.
How wide is that Bamberger right-of-way?
I think it's actually
Just out of curiosity.
just about 66 feet. 68 feet.
It seems so strange to me to put a road on the Higley property and then have this 68-foot space that is probably not too developable after that, unless you can get the property to the east of that.
Yeah, the timing was if the road runs down this line, then you're going to see lots eventually build off that way. Because right now that stem's not really feasible to do. Right now the AL is an 80-foot lot width, so this stem at 68 feet is not even large enough to get a home. That's why you're seeing it sitting back here, probably not driven by that. That's the flag shape was probably secondary to where the placement of the home was.
Can we develop property that's only 68 feet deep? I'm just assuming that the road completely was on the Higley property.
No, you would well.
You'd have to have some.
You're gonna likely have to go a little bit bigger to get your setbacks.
Other questions for?
So the width of the Higley property on Lund Lane is what?
110.
110?
They said.
I have another question for the developer, if we can
Measure in there.
ask them
We
back
have you
up,
come back up?
or the owner. Have you looked at that STEM lot, at purchasing that and improving upon that? And, I mean, if that's a natural place
110, 114.
of where the road is, have you looked at improving that and allowing the current property owner to maintain their residence, but just having that be the road?
And you're talking about the old rail line, right?
Yes.
So that is the plan. We haven't been in contact with the property owner yet, but if that is where the side of the property that city staff would like our access to be, then we planned on approaching that property owner about using that width as the access and leaving obviously access to that home there as well.
Other questions for the applicant?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Corey, can you zoom out again just a second? Let me see that 400 West.
Jog. It's like kind of a jog.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what that.
What's that? What are you looking at?
So as far as the master plan for that street goes, property ownership and development aside, where would the city ideally put that road? Would that go right along that diagonal line of the Higley property, or would you try to put it through the Bamberger?
It could
right-of-way?
go, if the connection's made, it doesn't really matter what side or on the Bamberger right-of-way. You can see that it's offset already through here. But if you come back all the way up here to our commercial area, the Bamberger right-of-way runs east side of Walmart. So I think it's more of a convenience factor, but if you can see that right here, you're following pretty straight. And I don't know how exactly on the old alignment it is, but you can see it jogs back and forth all the way up to here. So you technically could jog it all the way down here and run it right there and just tie this stub into that.
So the city doesn't necessarily have a preference at this point? Okay.
Now, the master plan is to make the connection to Lund Lane. You know, you could serpentine it and just hit it right here, right in the middle of all of this if you wanted. it seems that the way the layout of the properties, sales over time, that right-of-way was a limited width. That's why it's in its shape when it was acquired over time, and people are using that as the roadway.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, if you go to the bridge in Bountiful that goes over the road, that old steel bridge that the road is on, that is the actual bridge of the Bamberger right-of-way.
Other questions for staff or the applicant?
Corey, I have a couple questions. So from what I understand, since it's all in a floodplain, if
Well, it's been, most of it's been removed with this development. The floodplain's been mitigated.
In theory.
Well, and there's still some drainage issues, let's just say
Yeah,
that.
remember, floodplains are driven off of the Pine Creek, not surface water. Floodplains are a derivative of stream channel and intermittent stream and debris flows. Floodplains are not driven by surface water runoff.
Okay, let me say this. It was originally in a floodplain and it still has drainage issues.
Right.
If the Higley property were rezoned and redeveloped, I'm wondering would that cause any, with the current issues still remaining and not being resolved, you know, how does that
Well, if this
legally,
is, right now you have the natural drainage even on this property heading on to adjacent property. The natural flow has always been to the west.
right?
So that's occurring already. If this property is developed, you're going to change that, and all of the surface drainage on the property being developed will be channeled to a drainage system. So you'll now no longer have the natural flow on this property moving to the west. What you really see is on this side of the property, now the drainage flow has got to go to somewhere. If you have the street improvements on that side, that's the advantage of putting it on that side, you can capture that natural drainage right into the roadway drainage system. So
I guess I'm trying to think of the undue burden to the other neighbors if there's already issues that are not being resolved from redevelopment around them to then approve redevelopment. And
yeah, I would couch that the issues unresolved are going to be resolved unless there's a mistake or
right,
something
and I
been
would be
made.
comfortable with them once they're resolved. So that's kind of my hesitation that I have, is that there are still outstanding issues that have not yet been resolved. And
Yeah, but I don't think you can take a developers in the middle of developing a subdivision and under a bond and say some other property on a request is held hostage until that's taken care of.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, but sorry.
Go ahead.
Along those lines of the drainage, though, I kind of have a hard time believing that the whatever wood development is.
Woods Park.
Wood Park, thank you. Wood Park development is the dam that's causing all of this other stuff, and not water running off of that Wood Park. Because I have to imagine that the old Bamberger right-of-way is raised up. So
Yeah.
that would have been a dam.
If you look
or
at,
is a dam.
Yeah, if you look at the topography, this is all filled. That's why your houses sit up higher. It's all filled. They had, because of the floodplain, not the stormwater management, the floodplain, they had to build the livable space 1 foot above, and you have basements in there. So they raised the ground and put in the exposed back basements to make sure they're 1 foot above the floodplain. And so that property did rise in level, took away the topography. The natural topography, if you took this piece of property and looked at, because we spent a few weeks now looking at this. You see this is the barn on Dee's property. A lot of the pooling has happened right here. If you look at his topography, he's higher up here than he is back here, because the natural drainage went right down through this lot and right over here to this corner right into the frontage road. That's where your drainage naturally, that's been taken away. So the water that's coming off of these properties, the storm water that's coming off of all these properties, is traveling to the west, following that contour and pooling right here. And there's actually some pooling that occurs over here too. But a big portion is pooling right here, right where the contour was. And it cannot run further because now you have homes that are sitting up higher. Their backyards do slope down, so I won't say somebody's sprinkler doesn't spray onto the other property, but this is where the land drain runs right down this side and is to pick up that water and take it away. And it's not fully installed.
But that's enough land area there to put 7 or 8 inches or whatever of water standing right in that area.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're not draining all the way up to Main Street.
Oh, yeah, this is enough water. That's why you have stormwater impact fee, and you pay $2,000 an acre to build these facilities when you develop. There's a lot of water being generated there.
But I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to have to change the topography of this current parcel for redevelopment, that similarly
it's not as deep, but they will have to grade the property and all of the lots and the roof drains have to go towards the streets that'll be installed.
Okay, so then
Woods Park does not drain onto this property. We've checked the grades of the roads.
the next question I have is there was a public comment asking how would we safeguard density on this property? How could we prevent?
The issue is you're eligible for 4 units an acre gross.
Okay.
It doesn't take away the opportunity under planned development, and the city has not put a minimum acreage for single family. So there is no promise that this person may come in and say, I want to go through the PDO, which is a legislative process, it's not a guarantee, and say, I want to put on 2 extra homes. There's no inhibitor to that. Whether they qualify,
Except
whether
for
it meets must, and the city council.
The
And the city
legislative
council
bodies.
are the checkpoint on whether you would give a bonus. And that bonus is 20% of your density. Up to 20%. So you're not going to get a lot of extra lots.
So if it's 5, you're talking 1.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff of the applicant? Let's move then to motion and debate. Chair will entertain a motion.
Before we make a motion, can we talk about it a little bit?
Let's talk about it after we make the motion. And the motion can be to table, to disapprove or approve, or to do something else.
May I answer one question that you brought up?
You could submit that question to us, and we'll see if we can get to it. Can you submit that to us? Right
now.
Well, the public hearing has been closed.
Okay. Well, Corey's saying that Higley's land migrates water onto my property. It does not.
Okay, well, that's helpful to
City
know.
law is rain falls on your land, you keep it on your property, correct?
Mr. Chair, we've had lengthy previous discussions.
Yeah.
The applicant is upset, and
Is that not the law?
if he has concerns, he can raise that with the Public Works Director.
Yeah,
City law.
and please feel free to submit your question to us, but we've got to close the public hearing. Okay. No one willing to make a motion at this point?
Just so that we can start discussion, I'm going to make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to deny approval of zone map amendment from AL to RL for the parcel number 07-070-0032 located along Lund Lane.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the motion be denied. Debate? I'm going to start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not crazy about the rezone, but I'm also not crazy about denying somebody the right to use his private property in the way he sees fit. It's a fundamental right that we all enjoy. And to the extent that the issues raised tonight can be mitigated, which I believe that they can be, to the extent that it's possible to do so we don't injure the neighbors and don't injure the character of the area any more than any development would, and recognizing that all of the individuals who've spoken out against this project tonight also may, and someday in the future, be coming before this commission and asking for the exact same thing. Whether it's you or it's your successor in interest, somebody will be, because as was pointed out, and rightly so, things will change. We've seen Centerville change a lot in the 35 years I've lived here. And so I am not inclined to simply throw this out without further review. I think that there are some things we can further investigate and some additional data that we could receive as a commission that would be helpful to us in making our decision, but I would not favor a outright denial at this time.
I agree. I do have some concerns. I think that maybe I would be more inclined to table it and maybe try to, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for some type of preliminary to see the road. I mean, I'm looking at it, did we say 110 feet? You've got a 60-foot right-of-way. That only leaves 50 feet right there. I don't know how wide it gets at the end. I guess it would maybe help me to see more of that. I agree with Chair Hershey about the property rights of the individuals, but all of the property owners in the area, of course. So that's my feeling on it.
So I have a different take on that. So I firmly believe that property owners have the right to enjoy their property as they are, and the owner of this subject property has every right to develop that property as an agricultural low, and nobody's saying that he can't do that. He has every right to do that. Now, when we're talking about the zoning change, there's a reason why they think that's a legislative decision, is because there's impacts to what's around it. And I think we absolutely need to consider what happens around it when it comes to that zoning change. A couple of significant things. Well, in general, I think there's some really outstanding issues with this. Specifically, well, I think drainage is an issue, and I think you're going to kind of maybe change the dynamic of the neighborhood again by doing something like this. By putting a road in there, whether you put that down on the east side or the west side, without buy-in from the surrounding neighbors, you are essentially locking in those neighbors to their future, right? So if you put that road down on the east side of the subject property, then the right home could not exist if we extend that road further down to the south. It's just, the way I look at it on a map and measure it, it's not going to work. However, if you were to get buy-in from the neighbors, the right property, for example, and run it down the old Bamberger line, then it could work, and Mr. Wright his house could stay there, right? So I think this is a perfect example of where we as planners can take an opportunity to proactively plan and actually look down the road to the future and say, where do we want that road to go? This future road that is really not defined in there, but where would we like it to go? Do we want to stick it within the boundaries of the Higley property and then therefore lock in the surrounding neighbors to how it's going to happen? Or is this a good opportunity to say, you know what, it makes a lot of sense when the time is right to put that road on the old Bamberger right away and allow the property that's existing there to stay there, right? I think that in general, this is a type of a thing where this hodgepodge piecemeal type of development and rezoning development is exactly this type of stuff that leads to long-term problems where, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we're sitting there going, man, that didn't work out the way we hoped it would because we didn't really plan out all of the things well. I'd like to see, if this area is going to be developed, I'd like to see it be something that is a little bit more encompassing of the area instead of just trying to piecemeal it in and make it fit. So that's part of the reason why I am not in support of making this change. I think there's just a lot of questions that happen. There's a lot of surrounding issues that happen with this, and it really needs to be more of a holistic view instead of just here's what's going to happen right here, right now.
Well, Kevin, I agree with you on that. I know we've talked before about the danger of creating zoning islands where we have a different change in zoning right in the middle, surrounded by other zone. I think this would be a zoning island. We would take that one little strip and then everything around it to the west and to the south and to the east would remain agricultural low. That's not consistent with our general plan, how we want our zoning to be. So that's my first concern, is creating a zoning island. My second concern is, although I understand the bond, I understand that improvements haven't been completed with Woods Park, I feel very uneasy about current drainage issues not being resolved and then allowing further development, further fill, further grading to cause potential more issues. And I would like to personally table this to see if we can revisit this in a few months when some of those issues, if they're truly going to be resolved within a couple months, well, then let's see how those are resolved and how the neighbors feel about that, and then we can talk about that.
Let me just step in for Lisa's. It would be unadvisable to table for a duration to see how things are going to go. That would be something you could have a discussion with the applicant about, of what kind of information and what you would like to do, but I would not advise you to say, table this and see what happens. You either move forward with an application, table it to get some data, and then make a decision.
Let me raise a point on that, and you're absolutely right, Corey. I think that would be inappropriate, but an inappropriate reason, not necessarily inappropriate to table.
Okay.
But the point I'd like to make to both comments that have just been made, which I don't necessarily disagree with, I think we've got some issues that do need to be resolved. But I think it's important that we remember that if the owner of this property wished to do so, he could put 2 or 3 lots on that property right now under agricultural law.
Right.
And we've still got the same road issue, and we've still got the same drainage issue.
But the zoning island issue is not.
But the zoning island would not be an issue, right. But I'm saying if the reason you're saying what's
Well, that was my second
denied,
reason, yes,
then
yes.
I think those same problems exist even under agricultural law. So
Right.
that's not necessarily persuasive to me.
That's true, and I agree with you, Chair. That actually is a good point, that regardless of whatever, if they develop, then that would still be an issue. So that would be, I retract that issue. Let's just pull that back.
But at that point, though, we would still see a site plan, and that would still be up for discussion and whatever else. So, but let's not try and compound it by mitigating 4 or 5 lots instead of 2 or 3, right? So let's not make it worse than it has to be. So that's part of the reason why I would say let's not approve the zone change, because then we just compound a potential issue.
Well, and I feel like, as was expressed, stubbing is going to be upwards of $100,000, yes. But if you could still get more than 1 lot on that easily, and so you could still develop that.
I think your issue is you have 110, 114 feet, so you have about 80 feet in the AL, so you need to be 160 feet to get 2 lots, and so you're stubbing for a singular lot. Unless...
If only we had a flag lot ordinance.
Yeah, if only we had a flag lot ordinance. Unless it's feasible to still install the road for a couple of lots. So you really are limiting it right now to only 1 home.
Good point. I'm struggling with, as I said in my initial comments, I would not mind seeing more data, more information on what the plans are. I'm not sure we can ask the applicant to provide us with the conceptual at this point. I know that it costs money to develop those, and without a zone change, some applicants are unwilling to do that, but
well, and it's up to you. I mean, it's your decision, but if you're inclined for data, you know, we'd be happy to have the drainage utility manager and the city engineer come in and talk with you and personally have a discussion with you about what they see is going on and answer those questions if a tabling is even a possibility.
For what it's worth, I think I would be curious to see the data, but I'm not sure if in the end it would change my mind on this one. And I will admit I am struggling with this one as well, because I empathize with the concerns that have been raised about the drainage issues. If it were my property and I was having that occur, I would be furious at the Woods Park subdivision for causing it. But on the other hand, I also have Corey telling me that that's partly because this land drainage ditch wasn't installed correctly. And so if there is a way to mitigate those concerns, to me, the drainage, I mean, I would want to confirm that the drainage actually works, but it sounds to me like that can be mitigated. My larger concern is the island issue. I mean, if we were looking at this property and it was the Higley and Evans property, I think that it would be consistent. It would be a contiguous residential low development.
Or even the Higley and the Wright property. I even think, it just seems.
Even then, that would cause me some concerns.
That's true.
And so I look at it not even so much as the Higley property would be an island. I mean, that creates a really weird layout for the Evans property, and I think that it severely limits what they have the ability to do with their property in the future. So I think I would be, I do struggle with this one because I am also incredibly sympathetic to the Higley property owner who's being told that he has to pay a huge utility fee in order to do something with his property. And so it's a struggle for me. But I think that when it comes down to it, for me, I am concerned enough about the island problem that I think in this case, I would be inclined to deny.
One thought has occurred to me. We have a motion on the table to deny the application. We probably, since this is a legislative matter, we probably ought to articulate the reasons for the denial.
Would you like me to do that?
I think the maker of the motion probably should articulate those so that we can get those out on the table as well.
I'll not use the second one that I originally argued, but I would say suggested reason for the action would be because in doing so would cause an island of Mr. Higley's property surrounded by agricultural low, and additionally the property to the west owned by the Evans, that would also be an island as well, and is inconsistent with planning practices that we try to uphold in our general plan.
Would you be amenable to a friendly amendment?
Yeah, go for it.
So two of the factors that we are asked to develop, one is the proposed amendment harmonious with the overall character of existing development in the vicinity of the subject property. And I would say, no, it is not. And the second element is what is the extent to which the proposed amendment may adversely affect adjacent property? And I believe in this case, by creating an island, it would adversely impact the adjacent property, and most specifically the Evans property to the west.
Let's do that.
Well, I'm not jumping on your bandwagon. May I suggest one other one, and that is that we are concerned about a drainage issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the same concerns that you all do, but I do have the concern that this property owner then is stuck with his property, that he's not allowed to do something. So the island, I mean, we've got a precedent for a beginning of the change of this area. I'm very torn.
But I would say he is allowed to do something with it. It's just, it's either you impact the neighbors or you do it yourself, right? And so
but the neighbors are stated that they are not going to be changing And we've got a precedent in here. I don't know, I'm just torn by the whole thing, and the road issue is a problem with me as well.
But there's nothing that says that you have to force that upon your neighbors, though, so.
I think your concern is a good one. I mean, when we addressed the Ballinger Engineering Building, it was one of my concerns was that how can you say, well, my neighbor's property is zoned residential medium. Why can't my directly adjacent property be zoned residential medium too? In this case, what changes my mind is that there is the Evans property in between, and it's a, pardon the description, a long skinny piece there that is going to be tough to develop if we create this island residential low. But I do appreciate that concern.
I appreciate all of the concerns stated, but it's just a very uncomfortable.
And again, I think this is a situation where with that island, it's that piecemeal approach to planning, which we really try and avoid. We don't want to do, that the piecemeal approach to planning, I think, is very difficult and creates problems long-term, so.
Just one final comment from me. I would not be in favor of approving this at this time, this application, but I would like to table it and try to get some additional information regarding the zoning and access issues.
I would agree with that.
If we recommend denying the application, then, that's an effective tabling, and the applicant can come back again.
No, it's a 6-month prohibition.
Well, it's going to take that long probably to get things figured out anyway.
I'm just curious, based on quick math, what happens if we have 3 for, and 3 against?
The motion fails.
Motion fails.
So then the new motion needs to happen.
Come up with a new motion.
And then a new motion has to occur.
Right.
Good to know.
Okay, any other debate, comment?
And just for, if I Chair Hersey, you could correct me on this one. If both motions fail, then isn't it an automatic denial?
Yes, that's correct. Okay, the motion before the commission is to recommend denial, and for the reasons suggested by Commissioner Wright, which hopefully we've got in our minutes.
And amended by?
As added to and
Eloquently.
elaborated on by others. Basically, the island, the road location, effect on adjacent property owners and drainage, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do a roll call vote on this. Commissioner Daley?
Aye.
No?
Aye.
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 No.
Okay, the motion passes. The application is, we recommend
Recommendation
denial.
for denial to the council.
Recommendation for denial to the council.
So, Mr. Chair, just so the way of the public information, we'll forward your recommendation to the city council. So be looking at the city council agendas. In the near future, this would be placed on agenda for their consideration.
And just to point out, if the city council reverses our decision, they would probably remand for further findings. So we may be looking at this again, but that's up to the city council.
Is there any direction as a commission that we can give the property owner in trying to mitigate any of these concerns that we had?
At this point in time, I think you've made a decision based on the merits of the application, so you should just let that.
Yeah, I think we let it
voice
go.
itself.
I think the record is clear, and the applicant and the property owner have a pretty good sense of where the commission is on this.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. Okay. The next item of business is the
Didn't list it on there, but we have
it's
one
not on
item.
here, but we'd like to hear from our community development director.
we don't-
Cassie,
No,
you need to put that on so I don't forget about
It
it.
says adjournment right here.
Yeah, we have one item scheduled. Is it one? Or did we get that second application in?
And I also like seeing all of the decisions that were from
very
this,
helpful.
from the.
Yes.
There hasn't been any,
nice.
so you're
If
okay
we
there.
can, yeah.
So we do have one item for your next meeting. So hopefully it's I don't remember what it is,
It's
so it may
a
not.
CUP for the church that you guys just were, The church and industrial zone.
Yeah,
For the
So your
CUP.
record is a 12-minute meeting, not to try to hustle you, just was wondering if you want to
Well,
compete
I'm
with it.
wondering, as that maybe, you guys are all going to kill me for asking this. Is there anything that we can add to the meeting that might be good for proactive planning for us?
May I suggest one thing?
Go for it.
We've got a bunch of surveys in.
Right, we're going to hopefully be able to
Can-
categorize
can
that
we-
and make a report
yeah,
to you.
Can we get a report on that? We
I would
can-
like that.
Let's put
Yeah,
on the agenda.
our goal in that process is to itemize all of the comments, be able to break them up into classifications. What we want to do with you on the next meeting, which potentially is this next one, to make sure we can hit the time frame, is go over all of what you've heard, and try to sort through what I would call making statements from those ideas. And then if you have something to direct staff to do, direct and prepare language on this, direct and prepare language on that, or direct and prepare ideas on that, whatever you think we've achieved, then we would come back with either language or additional information to answer those, respond to those ideas, so.
Oh, I think it would be ideal if we can get it done that quickly.
I think we
To
can.
have as a second agenda item, a general report on the surveys and then discussion of the same,
And
along
I
with what we heard tonight.
I perceive we can, so.
Okay.
So can I ask one clarification with regard to that? Well, two clarifications. One, we also invited interested members of the public to submit comments to us directly. And I know that some of you were copied on comments that I received, and I received other emails from, I don't know whether other people were BCC'd or received the same email or not. I would encourage us all, if we've received emails, to forward them to Corey.
Yeah,
or
forward them to Cassie or myself, because we will provide in the backup materials all of the surveys and all of the emails too, so that so you have a copy of that data in hand.
Okay, so now here's my second question. You also encouraged us to keep notes, which I think we've all done from meeting with people today. Do you want our scribbles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
why don't we send those in and have them
And
utilize
if you
those.
felt like you wrote too fast,
Yeah.
take some time and just send it to us through email.
Perfect.
And copy everybody.
Yeah, and copy
when you-
everybody.
When you send to staff.
So, because we want to include all of that in this data set. We realize it's an informal data set, but usually you can glean
Yeah.
patterns from those.
That's helpful. It's kind of like we did with the survey on the west side, and it was, it didn't seem like we had a lot of participation, but we were able to glean a pattern, which
Yeah.
was helpful.
Generally, I found a lot of positive feedback just for the fact that we had an open house. I mean, people were all over the board with what they wanted from what I talked literally all over the board. But by, leaps and bounds, people just kept saying, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking this into consideration. Thank you for slowing down and talking with us. Because I think this is such a big part of our city that people were really grateful to have that. So that's why I'm saying, is there any other proactive planning other than that even, that we could even just start? Like, what's on our to-do list that we had? Let's chip away at that maybe? Am I being annoying?
Yeah,
that's true.
we can go back and get you what the goals were when you met with the council.
It's not a bad idea to revisit
Just
that.
maybe revisit our goals and see where, if we've taken any others on, and maybe we can just have quick planning discussion on how to keep talking about those or something.
The issue is we've been kind of tangent on several different projects as a staff and as a commission, so. But we'll bring back those minutes of those goal session, give you a report of that information. But yeah, we'll categorize it and we'll break it down so that your base data, we'll talk about the board, the surveys, the commission comments. You'll see them all separated, but then you also see that we'll categorize them and then filter them by that category so you can begin to see the patterns.
Perfect. Anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. I'm not going to ask for no votes.